Hi, welcome back to the Middling Along podcast. My guest today is Louise Lewis. She's a qualified nutritionist helping stressed out, frazzled women, I'm raising my hand here, you can't see me, to restore their energy and reclaim their calm by balancing their hormones, gut health, and nutrition. She's got a 4-step de-stress method, which I'm hoping she'll talk a little bit to us about in a minute, to get to the root cause of how they're feeling and bring things back into balance. She'll talk a little bit today about how she herself struggled with stress and burnout and is now passionate about spreading the word that you can recover. So welcome to the podcast, Louise.
Hi, Emma. Thanks so much for having me. Really happy to be here.
Now, we have to kick this off with a sort of a confession and an apology on my part, which is the irony is not lost on me that actually we had to cancel the first recording that we'd planned to do because I was trying to do too much and fit too much in, and I had 2 children off school because of COVID and too many things going on. So yeah, kind of apologies from me, but I think, as we said, it's important that we're honest about those days when just one more thing can kind of tip us over the edge, and that we have to recognize ourselves when we're doing too much and sort of learn to say no.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's so easy to not recognize that. Like, if you don't even recognize it in the first place, you can't get the stress or potential burnout under control because you don't even know that you're doing too much in the first place. Sometimes you know, but sometimes you just don't even realize that. You think that's normal to have that crazy busyness going on.
We're so used to it.
Yeah.
We trained ourselves.
Yeah,
Trained ourselves well.
We have. So it was great when you said let's reschedule. I thought, yes, I believe in that. Let's put ourselves first.
Absolutely. But you haven't always been doing what you do now. So talk to us a little bit about your kind of journey to what you do now, and sort of how you used your own experiences to inform the sort of the practice and that you're offering now for other women.
Yeah, sure. So it has been a really long journey. I probably started this whole journey to being a qualified nutritionist in 2013, maybe 2012, 13. I used to work in publishing, which is sort of how we know each other indirectly.
Yeah.
And I was with the company that I was with, gosh, about 14 years in the end. Really loved working for that company. Loved everything. I liked the team. I liked the work. I didn't dislike anything about it. It wasn't a crazy corporate soul-sucking job. It was a really lovely company. But there was something, I don't even know what it was even now, but there was something that was pulling me in a different direction. And at first I didn't even know what that was. And I used a blog. I had a different blog back then, not one I have now, to kind of explore my passions and where I might want to go. And so I blogged about fitness, nutrition, yoga, mental health. I struggled with and still struggle with anxiety now. So I blogged a lot about all these different random themes, and it did sort of lead me down the nutrition path in the end. And I ended up retraining. So I did a 3-year diploma in 2014 to 17 to retrain as a qualified nutritionist. Now, the thing was, I did this alongside my full-time job.
I was going to ask if you were trying to sort of squeeze that into the margins of your existing.
Yeah, and that's ultimately where the burnout came in. So I can now recognize I did have a burnout in, oh my goodness, ages ago, 2007 maybe, like my first job out of uni, out of my first degree. I worked in central London and I commuted from my parents' house in Windsor, and it was a 2-hour trip there and a 2-hour trip home. And I can recognize now that I wasn't in a great place. I had panic attacks. I just wasn't in a very good place. I didn't really know anything about looking after my well-being through natural ways. I didn't know anything like that. It wasn't on my radar at all. So I can recognize that now. But then in 2017, I knew that by the end, I knew I was burning out. Ironically, didn't recognize the signs as I was going through the stress of the retraining with the full-time job. We were also planning our wedding at the time. So we got married in 2017 as well.
One too many plates, maybe.
Yeah. And I just you probably recognize this, it's different. Everyone has different causes. but the feelings, sometimes are similar. So I didn't have any downtime, and any spare pocket of time I had was repurposed for something. So any 10 minutes, the bus or in between meetings, whatever it was, lunchtimes in my day job, I used for something. So it could have been for some study, for some life admin.
That sounds familiar. I'm sure there are plenty of people listening and nodding along and going, oh yeah, kind of 5 minutes while you're waiting for the kettle to boil.
Yeah, what can I do?
Load of laundry on, or I'm going to hang it out while I'm eating my toast.
Yeah.
Constantly multitasking.
Exactly. And that kind of, you don't have any, ultimately it leads to overwhelm, but you don't have any time to switch off. There's no time for your brain to just be. So your stress hormones are all up because there's no time for them to come back down again. And you have this feeling of, it's this doing mode, isn't it? It's doing versus being. And you have this feeling of there's always something I need to do. And so therefore I can't rest. And that puts your body into this perpetual fight-flight mode, which is where I was all the time. Yeah, so 2017, I had to just, I graduated. I got through, but I pushed to do that. And, in hindsight, I should maybe have paused it, taken a year out, asked my employer for part-time hours. And I didn't do any of that. I was just like, no, I can do it. I can do it. And like we were saying just off air, Emma, I think people looked at me, and people even said like, oh my God, Louise, how do you do that all? I can't believe you're doing your training and a job. Like, you're amazing. And I probably thrived off that, being the type A person that I am. But underneath, I wasn't.
I think it's interesting to unpack that a bit, actually. I'm honing in on what you said about, actually we are taught to see that as kind of achieving and something to be applauded and to look up to. And I don't know how did we get there, that actually seeing somebody be so busy and taking on all of those things is something to be celebrated when actually it's almost like we're all setting ourselves up for a hard time, for a bad time. But in doing that, and if only we could unravel that and actually celebrate people saying no to things and prioritizing themselves. But it's all very, very much tied up in this sort of our kind of productivity culture, but also that thing about, I think particularly for women, we have that sort of people pleasing, helping other people, feeling a duty to say yes to things. And this is definitely something that I am very guilty of, trying to work on.
I mean, we all are. And as I always say, my story is that I was doing that study and I had a full-time job, but it could be anything. It could be as we get older, we have kids, we have parents that might need looking after. We have senior jobs, we have reports, all of these, employee reports, all of these things. And it's that kind of superwoman complex, isn't it? Where we think that we have to do it all.
Do this.
And I would never let anyone help me. My husband always says, don't be a martyr, because I'm always like, no, I can do it. I just need to get through this next thing and, this next day and whatever it is. And I think really we need to, like you say, prioritize our well-being a bit more, and it's very difficult to do. It's not, it's definitely not easy to do it.
So once you sort of recognized that burnout in yourself, what did you do next?
So obviously my business was a side hustle at that point. It was in its infancy, so I took time off of that. I graduated, we got married, went on honeymoon, and then I just took a break from the business. I was able to go part-time in my publishing role, so I did eventually ask, and I got 4 days a week. So then I was able to do the business I did it on 2 days, so Friday and a Saturday, which was enough to get going, get some clients, get everything set up. And I did that for about 2 or 3 years. So instead of diving straight into the business, I took 2 or 3 years. I mean, I only went full time in my business last year. So I took that time to try and recover my nervous system. And I also saw a lot of, I did get help. So I went to the GP, which is always where you need to start. I saw a lot of complementary practitioners, and one of those was a nutritionist. Having just trained in that, obviously I knew a lot by that point, but helping yourself is another matter. So I took myself to somebody who I trusted and worked through some imbalances that I had ultimately in my body, which I now see were triggered by the stress. So the stress was the trigger, and I had to get that under control and work on my mindset and the emotional stuff. But then alongside that, I was able to work on these imbalances in my body that were then causing all sorts of symptoms, which we can go into if that's of interest.
Yeah, and maybe just pause for a second and ask you how, if we think that we're getting close to that sort of burnout state, how can we sort of stop and, I guess, interrogate ourselves and figure out, okay, am I actually at risk of burning out here or not? And no, I guess it's not necessarily a straightforward
It's not
kind of black and white thing.
And I think deep down we probably know, like you knew last week, that you were taking on too much, and therefore we didn't do. We were going to do the podcast, and then you said let's do it later, and then you were like, no, actually, let's just not do it. So deep down you knew. So sometimes we get that gut intuition, and if we're tuned into that, which we're not often, it's difficult, then, and we just plow on, then we can try and listen to that voice. I mean, the symptoms are different for everyone. So knowing myself a lot better now I know when I'm getting to that stage. And even though I practice what I preach, I'm not perfect. Yeah, exactly. And I get to that point. I do still get there. And then I think, oh no. And so I have some symptoms. So I have, like, I'll wake up at 5 a.m. and I'll be wide awake, can't go back to sleep because my mind has switched on and I'm going through my to-do list in my brain. I have a racing heart, that, my adrenaline's pumping.
You know what your kind of early warning signs are.
I know my early warning signs now. My gut health goes, that was a massive symptom of mine that took me a bit of time to get back into balance. But if that flares, then I know that is a stress that's triggered by stress. Mm-hmm. So it's listening to the body and thinking about those symptoms you have, that it's normally the sort of thing I find with clients that you think is normal and you just have to live with it. So it's never anything, unless you've actually reached burnout, which is obviously a whole other thing. But if you're creeping towards it, it's normally symptoms that you think are just, they're a bit annoying, but you just put up with them, like underlying fatigue, low energy, brain fog, gut symptoms, those sort of things that aren't awful, but then are just dragging you down. And those can be signs that the body is out of balance, and this can be caused by stress.
Yeah. I think it's also, we can't necessarily ignore the impact of the last 2 years either, and the sort of sometimes it's very hard to differentiate between all of that sort of background stress and anxiety and how much impact that is having on us versus other things. And let's be fair, the sort of maybe potentially perimenopausal kind of issues. So all of those things can sometimes be kind of hard to pick apart. So
it's really hard, and there's no denying the pandemic it's like a collective trauma, isn't it? It's just massive, and I don't think we appreciate it because we're just trying to get through it. And we're hopefully coming out the other side, but I do think the stress of that with everything else, be that our health, our family, our work, whatever it is, it's a lot for our nervous systems to be dealing with over a period of years.
And you were talking a bit earlier about sort of giving our bodies the time and space for those sort of stress hormones to dissipate. Presumably you're mostly talking about cortisol there when you're talking about that. How, I know there's no sort of magic formula necessarily, but is there a sort of a sense of how much of that downtime a typical person needs in order to have the opportunity or, you know, enough kind of rest and kind of respite to kind of get back on a bit more of an even keel?
Yeah, it's a really, really good question. I mean, we have two stress hormones. So one is adrenaline and one is cortisol. So adrenaline is adrenaline gets the blood pumping, gets the oxygen going around, gets the heart pumping. That's what we need in that, acute stress moment. And then cortisol is kind of our long-term stress hormone, and it keeps it going. So if you're always stressed, like I was, my cortisol was always, I mean, presumably I didn't test it on an ongoing basis, but would have been quite high. I did test it a few times and it was high. But that's what cortisol is doing. And what happens is when we're stressed, if you think about, I always have the analogy of a tiger back in caveman days. If we're faced with that tiger, then we need our body to react in a stressed way. Like, I want my body to react to that tiger because I want to get away from it. So you need that adrenaline and cortisol to start going, because we need some energy, which the cortisol will do as well. We need some fuel, and we need that blood pumping. That's what we need to run away from that tiger. The problem is the trigger now isn't a tiger. So we're not running away. We're just sat at our desk. So we're not using
but
that
our body
energy.
is wired the same way as if it was a tiger.
That's exactly it. Our body is still the same. We haven't adapted our stress pathways. The same reaction still happens regardless of, if you're interpreting that email as a really stressful thing, your body will still initiate the same stress pathways as if it's a tiger, because it's your perception of that email which is as bad as a tiger. So we're not using that energy, and then that energy can get stored around the middle as weight, added weight, those sort of things. That's what I mean when we have these imbalances. And the other problem we have from that is, if you were to outrun the tiger, there would be a point, hopefully, at which you've outrun the tiger. So then you would rest and recover and sit in your cave or whatever.
Yeah. And all those hormones kind of come back.
Yeah, the hormones come back down. Exactly. They're not there for, all the time, all day, every day. And so the problem now is that it's chronic. So we have these stress triggers over and over and over, and we don't have any rest. So we don't recover. So stress isn't bad, I always say. Like, I'm never saying that we don't ever want to feel stressed and that stress is this awful thing. It's natural. Like, your body is meant to respond in this way. All the things that happen when you're stressed, all these pathways that are activated, all the ones that are not, so things like digestion, reproduction, they're not needed when you're trying to get away from that tiger. So they slow down, can even shut down, like with reproduction. Those things are natural. Like, your body is meant to do that. That's a natural response. It's just that what's not natural is that it's over and over and over over a long period of time.
We're just not suited to, we're not supposed to carry that around with us 24/7.
Exactly. So in answer to your question then, which is a long way around, is we don't need to be like a Zen Buddhist monk, every day. We don't need to be meditating for hours on end to have an effect on our cortisol. We need pockets of time throughout the day where you're telling your body it's safe, that it's fine, the tiger has gone, essentially. It's safe to calm down. That's going to have an effect on your cortisol, which will affect all these other bodily systems, your digestion, your reproduction, your thyroid. It's going to calm your body down and tell it it's safe. So it could be 10 minutes in the morning, it could be 10 minutes in the evening, it could be a yoga class once a week, it could be reading in the bath, or whatever it is. It just needs to be regular. Short, regular relaxation is probably better than once a week for 2 hours. That's still beneficial, but you know what I mean. It's like exercise. It's a little.
So all those kind of good intentions that I have of actually having a lunch hour and stepping outside and sitting down and having a cup of tea and listening to the birds for 20 minutes, I should actually be doing that instead of just saying that I'm going to do it.
Yeah, that would be brilliant, because that's also halfway through the day. If your nervous system has gone up a bit, you're a bit like, from your morning meetings. If you just, like you say, go outside, take some deep breaths, even if it's just 3, have your lunch in a really calm way, because that's going to help your digestion as well. It's going to tell your body that it's safe, that it's calm, and it's going to give you more clarity going into your afternoon. And then you could do the same again at the end of the day. And that, could just be 20 minutes in total. but your nervous system will feel better for it.
Yeah. So, talk a bit. Can we talk a bit more about sort of how you are working with your clients, and sort of the methodology that you're using to help them with stress and burnout?
Yes, so I have everything I do is framed around my 4-step method, which is what works with my clients and essentially what I did. So the 4 steps then are calm, nourish, balance, and support. And they go in this circle because you always have to keep going back round. But they sort of work in order because I always start with calm, because even if you make all the dietary changes and we figure out your imbalances and work on that, if you're not calming the nervous system, if you're not telling the body the tiger is gone, then we're not going to have much effect. So you can't do the nutrition stuff without working on the nervous system when it comes to burnout, because burnout is multifactorial. It's never about just one thing. It's just my modality is nutrition, and that's what I'm working on, that kind of foundational body stuff. But you've got to do the calm. So I always start with the calm, and that can be anything like we've just talked about, relaxation, telling whatever it is that tells the body it's calm. And it doesn't include watching the telly, because that can be relaxing and it is time out, and you shouldn't.
Bad news, folks. I'm sorry, Netflix is.
You can, I love a good film or a crappy program, to switch your brain off. But a Netflix binge is not going to calm your nervous system down, especially if you're watching something particularly, I don't know, violent or action-packed. So we always start with the calm, and then we come to the nourish, which is obviously where we spend the most time. And this is where I'm looking at my clients as individuals. So everything I do is personalized, and we're looking at what imbalances are going on in this person that we can address with nutrition and lifestyle and food-based supplements. So it could be, we'll test the thyroid. When we're dealing with fatigue, the primary ones to look at are thyroid, and I test the whole thyroid rather than just 1 or 2 markers. There's about 5 or 6 markers. So we want to test the whole thyroid if we're dealing with fatigue. We want to look at iron to see what that's doing, full blood counts, and vitamin D. Those are the sort of things I'm looking at to see, is any of this driving that person's symptoms? Is any of this contributing to their symptoms? And can we then address those through supporting the body with the right nutrition for that person? Because what works for one person might not work for another. And I don't go down the route of diets and things like that, because when we're dealing with stress and burnout, actually calorie deficits can be not that supportive, because if your body's already stressed, we don't want to then tell the body there's a famine because it's going to.
It's a different kind of tiger.
Yeah, exactly. It's a stress state. It does put the body into stress. So, that kind of thing, fasting, that it's supportive for some people, but when I'm dealing with stressed, burnt out women, it's generally not. So we're working to re-nourish the body with all the nutrients that it needs, rather than taking loads of stuff out and making it deprivation based. So that's what we're looking at. And then we can address the gut as well. Like I said, I had a lot of stuff going on in my gut. I had bloating, I had constipation, I don't have those now. And it took a while, but I did do a stool test, and I did find quite a lot, actually. I was quite shocked for a nutritionist. I thought, oh no. So I worked through that by rebalancing the gut and helping my digestion, really, because it was caused by this chronic stress. So working on that, and then we can also work on the hormones, which when we're dealing with women between 30, 40, 50-year-olds, we are going to see we're likely to see hormone imbalances, and these can drive things like fatigue, weight gain, and it can be linked to cortisol. So all these hormones are related. Yeah, so that's how I'm working with my clients. Then we do the calm and the nourish step. We can rebalance the body. So that's the 3rd step. The balance comes from doing the calm and the nourish. And then the 4th step is support. And this is where we need a burnout prevention support kit in place, and it's different for every client. And so we need to find things like passions beyond work, because people become so identified by their work, they don't have anything else, or their kids, whatever it is. Purpose. We need might need other therapies. So looking at talking therapies, things like this. It's putting the support in place that the work we've done is not going to come undone, that you're going to have that awareness and those tools for life, basically.
Sounds great. So I will share in the podcast notes and also on my website how people can get in touch with you if they'd like to find out more. And also they can find you, I think, on Instagram. And you talk a bit more about what you do on there. But yeah, and any sort of parting words of advice for us if we're starting to feel a bit frazzled?
I think don't panic and start simple, because the other thing is, one of my principles of nutrition for stress is that it doesn't become a source of stress. So I don't ever want the nutrition and diet advice I give and work with my clients on to become a source of stress. So I don't want them to then panic about what to eat and stress about what to eat. That's why we avoid, restrictive diets. I don't want them to spend hours in the kitchen when they already don't have hours. A bit of time, certainly, maybe an hour on a Sunday to get food in order, do your shopping list, plan your meals, whatever it is, whatever you can do in an hour, but time box it and don't make it a source of stress. So it's kind of the same with the whole methodology I use. I don't want any of it to become another source of stress, because that defeats the whole point. It's there to support.
So you've got to build people. It into your lifestyle and make it manageable. And
exactly. So starting simple with things like you said, Emma, about just having that lunch break. If that was the only thing you did, had a lunch break from now on, that would really be beneficial. So it's starting really simple and starting from where you're at, not kind of this aspirational, perfect, non-burnout person. It's starting from where you realistically are and what you've got going on. So that would probably be my parting words, having said everything I've already said. But just start simple.
It's so easy to let it slide, though, isn't it? It's kind of first it's one day where I just I'll just do this in my lunch hour, and then before you know it, the whole week's gone by, and you can look back and think,
so it's coming up with strategies maybe. So I used to, when I was in employment, I used to block out my lunch hour in my calendar. So no one ever booked me. And if they did, they'd be like, oh, you've got something else on at that time. And then I would say, well, can you find another time for this meeting you're trying to book? Is 12 o'clock literally the only time you can do, or are you just putting it in? I mean, I didn't say that, but I would question. I wouldn't just take the meeting if I didn't have to, because I wanted to honour the lunch break. And people recognised that when I left, they said, "Oh, we'll always remember, Louise. You always took your lunch break," which I thought was
slightly nuts, isn't it?
I was like, okay, but just coming up with strategies like the 1 hour on a Sunday where you can prep your meals, making that a regular thing, telling your family you're doing that. It's the strategies to embed the habits is really what's going to get us there.
Fantastic. Well, I think it's a great place to come to a close. Thank you so much, Louise, for your time. Thank you again for being patient with me whilst I recognised that I was probably juggling too many plates that particular day. But I'm so glad we finally got to talk to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
You've been listening to the Middling Along podcast. Do remember to subscribe to be notified when our next episode is live. And why not visit the blog at www.middlingalong.com to sign up to my newsletter as well. I do hope you enjoyed listening today. If you did, I'd be really grateful if you would consider leaving a short review, as that helps people find the podcast and helps get it noticed. Hope you can join us next time. Goodbye for now.